A wonderful presentation of mine. I thank the organization and the dedicated workers. You are as dedicated as anybody else. And to put an organization like this, it takes tremendous energy, dedication, and a will, and a commitment. It looks small organization. Nothing is small. In New York, if you can put 10 people together, you have made a great impact in the world. That's how important New York is. Putting 10 people in New York is just like putting 10,000 people in China or India or any other countries. Because there are so many things going on, there is no time for anybody to attend anything. So the message is, the strength of message is the same always. Remember that. So never get disheartened. Continue what you're doing. Only 3 people or somebody, something like in a bar or in a restaurant, they started Lions Club. They just talked about it. Today, it is an international organization doing so many things. Anyhow, today's topic is yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. Before I dwell into the main subject, I want to clear to this esteemed audience some of the misconceptions, misconstrued ideas that is floating about yoga. Yoga is the most, why most? I must say the utmost popular word in the world. Still, there are so many misinformations and misconceptions written today and floats around, especially in this country. You may ask why. It is very simple, because yoga has become today the biggest commodity, business commodity in the world, especially in America. It brings about $22 billion. This I'm quoting 5 years back. It's almost a company bigger than Microsoft company. Then you can imagine why this confusion is. Everybody, every individual, every organizations want to claim authority on this. They call it by so many types of names: dog yoga, Bikram yoga, hot yoga, there may be a cold yoga. Recently I heard Christian yoga. Even it has brought religious insecurity in the minds of ignorant people. But let me make one thing very clear. This fact you have to take home. There is no ifs and buts. There is no question of possibilities. It is a science originated and created in the country India, in the ancient India. Remember that. There is no ifs and buts about it. There is no confusion about it. It is part of Hindu religion. It is what a Hindu practices every day without being taught. It is natural for them. But it should be practiced. It can be practiced by anybody in this world belonging to any religion. There is no religious barrier. There should not be any type of doubts or fear for anybody in this world, whether it's a Jewish religion, Muslim, Christian, or any religious person can practice this. Because why? It should be encouraged to be practiced. He can have a greater spiritual experience. That is the purpose of yoga. Patanjali did not do it for a particular religion. He did it for the humanity, the entire humanity. That is why it has become popular. Till the turn of the 19th century, it was a science that is practiced silently by every Hindu householder. It was not known. It's only after Swami Vivekananda visited this country in 1890s, especially in Brooklyn, or maybe in Thousand Islands, he wrote the translation, English translation of yoga. Ever since then, it has regained popularity in this country. Till then, it was not known much. If you take as a matter of fact, some quarters claim it as health science. Some of them claim it as science to beautify your body. As a matter of fact, last time I was invited to talk on yoga in a health festival. I am a vascular surgeon. With all humility, if I may say so, I should tell that yoga is not a science for health. It is not a science for body beautification. Having said that, a yogi or one who practices yoga enjoys a high sense of physical mental, psychological harmony, a high state of well-being, and he is better prepared to take care of his life, day-to-day problems of the life. He is a better individual. He has a spiritual edge on everybody. That is a fringe benefit of yoga. But for health, Indian sages created another science, Ayurveda. For each thing they have created a science. There's no dearth for science. Historically speaking, I can boldly say this with scientific convictions that this science was practiced by Indians 6,000 years back, 4,000 years before Christ. This is recorded. I don't know before that when it was practiced. This is recorded. Last century, they excavated the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro civilization, and the subjects of that civilization practiced this yoga. So that means it was written long time back. That is history. The yoga is one word. Mysteriously, this entire science revolves around this one word. Yoga in Sanskrit means union. Also, another important meaning for yoga is wisdom. So in this context, it has both the meanings, union and the wisdom. Patanjali is very clever. He said, if you follow my science stepwise, ultimately you are going to unite. You are going to have a union. And he never revealed that union anywhere at the beginning or the middle of the book. But it is an experience. What is the proof? There are great sages, great saints, and the sadhus of India have attained this union. We can see it in their lives, ancient times as well as in the modern times. So it behooves a student of yoga to believe in this science and practice this science intensely because he believes, he knows, he has examples. It has stood the test of time. Coming to the main subject, Patanjali wrote the yoga in the sutra form. Now, it's very difficult for me to explain what sutra is in English. The closest word I can say is equation. When I give an equation, E is equal to mc squared by Einstein. Can anybody understand that if he gives that, only that equation and goes off? But somebody has to explain it. He has explained it. Same way, it takes a genius of a genius to create one sutra. And it takes also a genius, a similar genius, to write a bhashya on that. Bhashya means commentary. Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras. If I'm not wrong, Panini wrote the bhashya on that. Panini is another great sage who gave the clarity of speech for us. Vyakarana Shastra, he goes. All the grammar, anything, anywhere in this world, is nothing but a offshoot of Panini's Vyakarana Shastra. You cannot cover that Shastra. So Panini wrote the Bhashya. Patanjali wrote the sutras. Each sutra is like an equation. It is like a nut. It's like a seed. If you break it, it can become the tree. Each sutra can open the door for an entire new world, entire new science. Taking one sutra of Patanjali, there are sages who contemplated on that and brought revolutionary concepts in this world. I'll give you one example only. The first sutra. See, sutra, Patanjali wrote this in 4 chapters. He called it as saptas. The first chapter or the first sapta is Samadhi Sapta. It contains about 48 slokas. Second is Sadhana Sapta. It contains 54 slokas, or maybe 53. The third is Vibhuti Sapta. It contains another 54. And the last one is Kaivalya Sapta, which contains 38. Actually, exactly, there are 198 sutras in the Panini Yoga Shastra. At the first sutra, each sutra is a sentence. No, not even sentence. I am wrong if I say 10 sentences. It is few words. Most of them are one word. Can you believe this? One word. And some of them can have 2 words, 3. I have not seen any sutra more than 6 words. The first sutra of Panini says like this: Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. One word. Only one word. Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. In Sanskrit, you can make it like that. If I divide it, yogaha, chittaha, vrittihi, nirodha. See the meaning. I'll give you only the English meaning. It may not make any sense for all of us if you know just the meaning. And it's bewildering for all of us when you know the entire meaning. I can say the entire meaning today because it's contemplated by so many sadhus and sages and given to us. Otherwise, it's not possible for us. Yoga means union. Chitta, mind. Vratti. Vratti has got many meanings in Sanskrit. One is job or mutations, alterations. Vratti, job. If you ask the mind, what is its job? The mind's job is just thinking. Thoughts. Imagination is thinking. Memory is also retaining of the thinking. So thinking. Last word is nirodha. Nirodha means cessation. Now if you read it, it says union or wisdom, knowledge is cessation of mind's thinking. Basically, totally contradicting to all our beliefs. We always thought knowledge is thinking. Thinker, we say. Thinker is the greatest knowledge. But here, Panini declares at the outset, knowledge comes out of a thoughtless stage of the mind. It's a blank mind. There's no thoughts. It is an oxymoron sentence. Believe me, sages who contemplated on this brought out world-transforming philosophies. In the ancient time, even in the modern times. There are hundreds of techniques were developed to bring this thoughtless stage of the mind. Maharshi Yogi, recently, he said, it's very simple. You go beyond the thought, he said. You transcend the thought. And I have the technique to transcend the thought. And I give you transcendental meditation, he said. Hundreds of thousands of people fell for that. Even Beatles sat under his feet. He was catapulted into world fame overnight. Then another sage came and said, it is very simple. You have to elevate your mind beyond the laws of the mind. And he called it as a levitation meditation. There are so many meditations were born like that. Jiddu Krishnamurti, the contemporary famous philosopher, he said, mind is full of thoughts. What thoughts are these? All thoughts of the past. There is nothing known as future thoughts. Even the future thoughts is based on the past thoughts. Delete the thoughts, he said. Deep past your mind, and the mind goes into the original state. That original state is the wisdom state. That's the state in which all these innovations, originalities, creativity comes. Even a singer who sang today, if you can go into that state, then comes that music. In that music, you are a creator. Till then, you are an imitator. Why? Because you are dwelling on the past. So in that state of mind, there is creativity. That is what Jiddu Krishnamurti said. It's all based on what? The first declaration of Patanjali. Then imagine 198 declarations he has made. And you can imagine what an impact it can have when everything is expounded. Not all of them are expounded still. Some of them realized it. Not everything is expounded. It is still a secret in India. Only once in a way a Swamiji or sage comes from the top and gives us one sloka. And it becomes $22 billion business. So that is why it is kept like that. It's good. Now we'll go to the Ashtanga Yoga itself. Ashtanga Yoga means 8 folds. 5 are external folds, 3 are internal folds. The 5 external folds are Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, and Pratyahara. 3 internal are Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. 3 internal folds. There is no point in going straight into yoga unless you start from the bottom. It will have very bad consequences. First is niyama. Niyama means discipline. The meaning of niyama is discipline. Discipline of what? All the senses of body. There are 5 senses, and the mind is the 6th. Disciplining these senses is the most important thing before getting into the yoga. It is a foundation for you. Then the yama. Yama is also a discipline of the mind, but it is a clarification of the truth by intense resolutions, like tapas or yajnas, anushtanas. So many things they do. That will clear your mind. That is yama. The third is the most, if anybody heard of a yoga or done yoga, asanas. This is the thing about yoga now. Everybody thinks yoga means asana, a physical exercise they think. There are thousands of asanas based on the observation of the nature. But it is not the thing of yoga, remember. It is one of the primordial things of yoga. That is important, but it's not engrossing the entire yoga. Today you can see, in the name of yoga, they should not call it as yoga center. They should say it as asana center, actually. They do not teach yoga. They teach you only asanas. There is every corner of Manhattan, there is a yoga center. What they do, they teach asanas. Asana is not the thing. Asana is important, but it's not the thing of yoga. Today is misunderstood that yoga means asana. That's it. There's no other understanding of yoga. The fourth one is pranayama. Pranayama is also well known, like asana. The next thing people know is pranayama, but unfortunately, it is not practiced well because it's not taught well. Why? There are no good teachers to teach. Asana is very easy to teach. It's not easy to do like what Sanjay did. It's not to that perfection, but you can teach. Make few dollars. First time you hear, second time you do, third time they teach. It's as simple as that. They are all teachers. So that is not the asana we are talking about. Asana must be done. You should see Swami Bhuva doing the asana. There is nothing beyond that. So pranayama, I'll dwell little on the pranayama because you should know about it. Prana, it is said that there is a energy in each human body. It is situated at the anococcygeal area at the bottom. It is in a static form. A science has developed so that you awaken it and raise it and expound it. So once it's expanded, it merges with the universal prana. Now this prana is an energy, it's not a material energy, remember. It's not like we have electric energy and magnetic energy in the body. But it's not that energy we are talking about. These are all offshoots of prana. Prana is just like the life. When the prana is gone, we are dead. As long as the prana is there, we are alive. Now this prana, when it's awakened, it merges with the universal energy, and the science which awakens it is known as pranayama, because prana controls all the functions, and one of the main functions that controls is breathing. So indirectly, by breathing exercise, we try to awaken the prana. There are so many types of breathing exercise being given, as Kapalabhati, Anuloma Viloma, Brahmari, many things that we can go and talk. But these are all methods of rhythmically awakening the prana. That is why the prana is. Fifth one is the pratyahara. Pratyahara is the most important thing of the whole yoga. It has to be practiced from the beginning to the end. After you become a yogi, also it should be practiced. Why? Imagine all these things, what you're doing, yama, niyama, pranayama, asanas, produce a tremendous amount of psychic energy in the body. The psychic energy makes one feel very high. What we'll do is like taking drugs. At the end of the yoga, you become so high, what are you going to do? Immediately, you want to enjoy that. That's the first thing you use for any energy for. Now, it is a vicious cycle. You produce this psychic energy produces enjoyment. This will make you fall down into immoral state sometimes. You can do illicit things, foul things, because in a state of high feeling, one can do that. That is why pratyahara is important. Pratyahara guards the yogi from all that. First, it's a psychic energy. But once you go to the internal aspect of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, you get psychic powers. You have heard of sadhus and some of the sadhus who have psychic powers. It's all because of yoga. Psychic powers is greater temptation for one to do illicit things. That's why sometimes you hear, I am surprised and very disappointed to hear an article in New York Times. He blamed, the writer blamed the Shastra of yoga for the moral decay of certain individuals. It is nothing to do with the yoga. It is because they have not practiced pratyahara. Even after the yogi completes, like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, what are these powers? Best thing is don't use it. They have powers, psychic powers, you should not use it. That's what he said. Because the pratyahara is practiced even after that by them. So pratyahara, what it does, these psychic powers and psychic energies, it sends it inside to progress further in the path of yoga. That is the purpose of this. That is the purpose of pratyahara. Now we go into the internal aspects. Dharana, dhyana. What's the difference between dharana and dhyana? Dharana means a total focus of the mind on a particular object, particular concept, particular thought. Total focus. It's like going to the Lord Ganesha temple and sitting in front of him and praying. At that moment, there may be hundreds of people, lot of noise, but you are not aware of that at all. Your focus is only on that. If you can develop that type of focus, that is known as dharana. But whatever you do, I am talking now, and my total focus is on my talk. That is some example of dharana. A musician or a sportsman or anybody in any work, either the work may be small or big, a total focus and total attention to only that is known as dharana. But what is dhyana? Dhyana is filling the mind at the same time with the thought of that object on which you are attending. Lord Ganesha, only I am thinking of Lord Ganesha only, that particular moment. When this dhyana and dharana gets together, you result in a state of samadhi. That is the highest state. When dharana and dhyana and samadhi mingles and merges, it's known as samyama. Samadhi. What is this samadhi? It's a very mysterious word. Everybody talks about samadhi. If you split it, it's a Sanskrit word, sam, a, dihi. Sam. See, Sanskrit is the mother of Indo-European languages. All these English root words are from Sanskrit. Sum. What is sum? Total. Right. Sum, total. Absolute. Absolute sum total. Dihi, consciousness. Absolute total consciousness is known as samadhi. Aren't we all conscious? What is this sum total of all consciousness? What is this super conscious level? What is this universal conscious level? A doubt comes in our mind. We are all conscious. Are we conscious really? Actually, we are using the reflection of this universal consciousness for the sake of our awareness. You are aware. You are aware of the external objects. We are aware of our own thoughts, imaginations. We are aware. That awareness is a borrowed aspect of consciousness. When you are aware, you are not in consciousness. But when you are in consciousness, what is the difference? When you are conscious, in the consciousness, you are not away from the awareness. You are not aware. The moment you are aware, you imagine. Remember, you are not in the level of consciousness. When you are in the middle of consciousness, you lose awareness. Nothing is existing for me that particular moment. I am in the middle of it. This, I can talk to you all. Why? Because each one of you have experienced it certain times of your life. When you are grossly involved in something, suddenly you are not aware of it. You are not aware of yourself. You are not aware of anything. Where you are in the consciousness. That is why I can explain to you. So everybody has that glimpse of it. But can you be all the time in that consciousness level? That is the greatest thing. When you are conscious, in that super consciousness, universal consciousness, awareness goes off. We are all the time seeing, enjoying eating, or touching, hearing, smelling. We are doing something like that, awareness, from birth to death, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 352 days a year, we are in the state of awareness. Not one moment we took part to be in that consciousness. When you are in that consciousness, there is no need for any knowledge from external aspects because there is knowledge by itself. When in that, there is no need for light because light by itself. There is no need for pain or pleasure because it's a bliss by itself. It's an absolute state of bliss, absolute state of existence, absolute state of knowledge. Sat, Chit, and Ananda, it is said. That is the state. Na tat basya suryaha, na shashankaha, na pavakaha, yat gatva na nivartante, taddhama paramam mama. It's a great sloka this is. There, it's not lighted by the sun, nor the moon, nor the pavaka, Agni, or the fire. Where once you go there, you don't return back because it is the greatest abode of mind. That's how it is said. So that is the union Patanjali is talking about. The yoga can take us into that level. This may look like a very tedious journey if I talk theoretically for you all, but Sri Krishna has made it very simple for all of us. He says, Yukta ahara viharasya, Yukta chestasya karmasu, Yukta sapnava bodhasya, yoge bhavati dukkhaha. Very simple, he says. Yukta is a very beautiful word. It is as much as you want, like that he's telling. Or as much as needed. As much as you needed, you try to do things in this world as appropriate, like whatever you're seeing, whatever you're eating, what you're smelling, whatever you are doing, you are enjoying, whether you are sleeping, whether you are awake, do only as much as it is necessary. Then you can ask how much to eat. Eat when you are hungry, in the words of Buddha. Drink when you are thirsty. Sleep when you are tired and feeling sleepy. That is the adequate proportion. So if you do that, he says, yoga bhavati dukkhaha. This is yoga. It takes all your sorrows out. In other words, everything what we do is a karma, from birth to death. Yoga karmasu kaushalyam. Excelling in whatever we are doing, efficiency in whatever you're doing, that itself is yoga. That itself takes all the sorrows. That itself keeps us merged in the universal consciousness. I shared my views with you all. I thank the India Center for inviting me here and letting me share a tiniest knowledge I have about yoga. This is the tiniest knowledge, and you can understand how much it is there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Rai. Thank you very much. A very big hand for Dr. Rai. So now we can all agree that the most powerful four-letter words in the English language or in any language is yoga. Right, Dr. Rai? $22 billion in the United States alone